I recently read an article in the Jewish Political Studies Review on the new anti-Semitism, written by Natan Sharansky. The article begins as follows. When I was a dissident in the former Soviet Union, one of my regular activities was monitoring anti-Semitism and smuggling out evidence and records of such activity to the West. I believed then that the free world, particularly after the Holocaust, would always be a staunch ally in the struggle against anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, I was wrong. Over the past 4 years, we have witnessed a resurgence of anti-Semitic activity in the democratic world. In Europe, synagogues have been burned, rabbis have been abused in the streets, Jewish children have been physically attacked on the way to school and inside schools, and Jewish cemeteries have been desecrated. Moreover, the so-called new anti-Semitism poses a unique challenge. Whereas classical anti-Semitism is aimed at the Jewish people or the Jewish religion, new anti-Semitism is aimed at the Jewish state. Since this anti-Semitism can hide behind the veneer of legitimate criticism of Israel, it is more difficult to expose. Making the task even harder is that this hatred is advanced in the name of values most of us would consider unimpeachable, such as human rights. Sharansky's words resonate with me. But the new anti-Semitism, as he calls it, isn't new. He wrote that article 17 years ago, in 2004. Nevertheless, it somehow feels new, different, heightened, more expansive. Perhaps this is because of the influence of social media, with its hyper-simplified memes costumed as full reality. Perhaps this is because of our post-9/11 framing that normalized the 24/7 news cycle, indulged our cravings for instant gratification, just as it dulled our already diminished tolerance for nuance and complexity. Perhaps it's the result of the heightened political divides and polarization that govern our lives these days. Perhaps it's the result of allowing the fringes of our political parties more oxygen, more airtime, and greater access to the center, a phenomenon not reserved only for America, but manifesting all over the world. I could keep going. But here's one thing I am pretty sure about. While each and all of those things may have contributed to whatever we see happening with anti-Semitism in its newest forms, when it comes down to it, there is nothing new about anti-Semitism at all. It might be dressed up differently, but underneath, it's the same insidious, old hatred. It always finds a way to slither itself into our lives and into our world. And while it may manifest itself one way on the one side or in a different way on the other, we should not forget that there is not one side who has the sole reserve on the more egregious of its forms. Despite whatever hatred each side has for the other, we must remember that those extremes find alignment and agreement over their shared hatred of the Jew. In these last 2 weeks, spewed across the airwaves, a trending Twitter hashtag was "Hitler was right," and often in those same tweets, so-called influencers equated or equate Jews, not the Israeli government, not Israelis, Jews, with Hitler. Just try to wrap your head around that incredible irony. In the self-same week, a congressperson in our country equated the wearing of masks to Jewish life in Nazi Germany. The media and politicians, and perhaps we, like to think of these things as different from one another. But in the end, both revolve around the utter devaluation and the negation of the Jew. A word here about Israel-related anti-Semitism. Whether or not a Jewish person loves or hates Israel, the anti-Semite sees no difference. Just ask our college students who've been asked whether or not they are Jewish before they can participate in a social justice activity on campus. And if they answer yes, they are then asked to take a loyalty oath, disavowing Zionism in all its forms. No one else is asked that question. Scroll through your own, your children, or your grandchildren's Twitter or TikTok feeds to see anti-Semitic comment after comment. My daughter Cammie is 12. She follows fashion and arts and crafts. She asked me the other night why everyone she follows hates the Jews and calls us murderers. There are many pogroms. People are hiding their kippot and taking off their Jewish stars, not in Europe, but here. And as the author Jordana Horn rightly asks, why am I being told, as I tell people about targeted violence against Jewish diners on the streets of Los Angeles or New York, or people wearing Jewish stars, this is complicated? If love is love is love, then you better believe that hate is hate is hate. You can't claim one and not the other. And anti-Semitism then deserves that same sole and full attention as any other form of hate. When some politician or pundit disavows anti-Semitism, but then follows it up with, and all other forms of hate, it's the very same thing as claiming all lives matter in the face of African Americans. It's just one more way of denying the Jews our full agency and claim. At the end of the day, as Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory put it, Jews are the object of anti-Semitism in all its forms, but its cause has everything to do with the dysfunction of the communities that harbor it. Anti-Semitism becomes dangerous in any society when three things happen: when it moves from the fringes of politics to a mainstream party and its leadership, when the party sees that its popularity with the general public is not harmed thereby, and when those who stand up and protest are vilified and abused for doing so. All three, in some form, are happening in America now. I confess I do not know the full way to respond to all of this. My Zionism and my Judaism, so little of it is motivated by or in reaction to anti-Semitism. Until recent years, this was always a gift, but it is no longer. So this is all very difficult for me as your rabbi and as a Jew. I hope to continue to develop a full response and plan, and I plan to do so with you over the coming year. But in the meantime, there are a few things I do know. First, we need to know how to identify anti-Semitism. We need to learn about it. We need to learn how to talk about it, and not how we were taught to talk about it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, or more. We need to learn how to talk about it today. We've made a new page on our website dedicated to responding to anti-Semitism. It's full of resources, programs, recordings of programs that we've had here at NSCI in the last 2 weeks and in the past number of years specifically on this matter, links to ways of understanding anti-Semitism's history and evolution, along with guides on how to talk about anti-Semitism in all its forms and advocate for its prevention and the safety of our Jewish community. Second, we need to remember that even though this may feel pervasive and overwhelming, we are not alone. Although there are many perpetrating anti-Semitism, there are still more who are not, and others who are coming around and still can be brought around. The conversation isn't over. We have to continue to keep lines of dialogue open. We have to do what we can to educate others about the matter of anti-Semitism and how it affects us and them. This is not something that can be done in a comment feed on the internet. And it doesn't have to be done by everyone. If you don't feel safe, you do not need to engage in this conversation. But if you do, and you have allies and friends in different communities, I implore you to talk to those friends face to face. Share your pain. Help to educate them so they can educate others. Like any form of hatred and the people it targets, the Jews cannot be their own sole defenders. Many of us have walked alongside our neighbors when they needed us. It's time to ask them to walk beside us now. Last, we need to remember that the very best way to fight anti-Semitism is to be proud Jews and Jewish families. Not Jews in name only, not Jews who disavow their particularism in favor of the universal, but rather Jews who embrace particular Jewish thinking and practice it. And they practice that not just within their Jewish community, but outside of it in the communities with which and with whom they engage as well. To be a Jew in its fullest sense is to be both of these things. To be sure, there are boundaries to that tent, and those begin when a person engages in word or action that seeks to destroy Israel or the Jewish people, or enables or condones violence in support of extremist ideology or theology. There's no place for any of that in the big tent. But within the vast majority of those in that tent, we must, as individuals and a community, reject the assertion that you either care about the Jews and Israel or you care about others and the world, and that you cannot be both. This is a false dichotomy. It belies the core of what it means to be a Jew. I am a Zionist, and I want Palestinian suffering to stop. I am a believer in the possibility of coexistence. I am a person who has built my career and my life on the foundational assumption that a diversity of viewpoints can be held and sustained in one community, and that at the very same time, I can build alliances and friendships across all sorts of other diverse groups. This is not a betrayal to either. And to suggest as such is no less, and perhaps even more, if we're honest, dangerous to the Jewish people than any external anti-Semitic threat. Yes, we have to look out for ourselves. You always look to your own house first. But we are called upon to do more, and that involves upholding our particular Jewish mission, as Elie Wiesel taught, not to make the world more Jewish, but to make this world more human. Shabbat Shalom.